The Mojave Desert, its name alone is a promise of desolation, a vast sun-bleached canvas stretching without mercy across the American Southwest. For travelers, it is the void between vibrant cities. For the military, it has always been a convenient vault, a place where secrets can be buried under layers of hot, indifferent sand. The Mojave doesn't merely contain history, it seems to archive it, holding on to the rust of forgotten wars, the concrete scars of missile tests, and the hushed legends surrounding sites like Area 51. This arid landscape operates on its own set of rules, often defying the simple linear mathematics of our human perception. We spent decades staring upward, convinced the threat would arrive from the stars. We were critically, profoundly wrong. The true threat, the collapse of continuity, emerges not from the cosmos, but from the desert's own distorted depths. My name is Alex Reed. My professional life was built on certainty. I was a chrono engineer, someone who mapped and predicted the future through complex algorithms of temporal modeling for a major tech conglomerate. Time, to me, was a measurable, predictable constant, a straight, unbroken line of cause and effect. That foundational belief was obliterated 3 years ago when my brother, Daniel, simply ceased to exist. He wasn't a civilian, he was a physicist, working on highly sensitive research at a compartmentalized facility known only by the codename Project Serpent, located deep within the isolated military-controlled expanse of southern Nevada. His last contact was a voicemail, a fragile transmission against a backdrop of chilling static. His voice was barely a whisper, a desperate, final warning. "Don't look for me, Alex. You can't track it. There are no minutes here. They ate them. They ate the minutes." Daniel's disappearance was the inverse of a crime. It was a complete erasure. Law enforcement categorized him as a standard missing person, yet his digital presence was wiped clean. Bank records, medical history, even old social media profiles seemed to have been retroactively scrubbed, leaving no trace of the man who was. The only remaining anomaly was a persistent singular signal, the final GPS beacon from his government-issued satellite phone. It wasn't a constant ping, it was a rhythmic burst, repeating with unnerving regularity every 15 hours and 22 minutes. The coordinate always pointed to the exact same mathematically precise center of a perfectly circular, barren patch of land in the Mojave, a place of total, impossible silence, which I came to call the blackout zone. The zone, I discovered, was not a secret base. It was an acknowledged, though suppressed, geophysical anomaly. My research traced its origins back to the 1960s, a chaotic era of rapid testing in the Nevada desert. The prevailing theory is that the extensive detonation of experimental nuclear devices did not create the phenomenon, but rather activated a pre-existing instability. Indigenous tribes of the region had legends referring to this tract of land as the place where the sand forgets, a powerful, ancient warning we should have heeded. I spent 18 months compiling disparate records, declassified air traffic control tower logs, erratic seismic reports that were immediately filed away as instrument malfunctions, and even anecdotal accounts from decommissioned military personnel. The pattern that emerged was undeniable and terrifying. Any object, living or synthetic, crossing a 3-mile exclusion radius of the zone's center would experience a fundamental disruption to its relationship with time. Aircraft clocks would consistently drift by several minutes. Vehicles would show impossible mileage readings. Even high-precision atomic clocks would momentarily stutter, then recalibrate as if a small, finite duration had been deleted. Inside this zone, the basic concept of time as we know it, linear, sequential, constant, completely dissolves. My working hypothesis, which the academic world would have instantly dismissed as madness, was that this space functions as a chronal sink, a powerful geomagnetically stabilized vortex. It doesn't merely slow time, it actively consumes the energy of time from its local environment, creating a hyperstable vacuum where normal physics fail. But this vacuum is not empty. Trapped within it are those individuals who entered at a moment of peak temporal stress or activation. These are not the specters of folklore. They are temporal refugees. They are not emotional remnants, but physical, cognitive entities plucked from their own timelines and forced into coexistence within this chaotic, non-linear reality. They might appear as figures from the 1950s atomic age tests, the recent past, or even a bleak, unimaginable future. They all occupy the same physical coordinates, yet they are bound to the temporal coordinates of their moment of capture, existing simultaneously but invisibly to one another. To confirm this insanity, I needed a guide, someone who spoke the language of physics but understood the nature of the abyss. I found Dr. Elizabeth Stone, a brilliant mind whose career had been destroyed after she proposed that space-time is not a passive medium, but a living entity, and the Mojave is systematically consuming it. I tracked her to a dusty, isolated trailer settlement, presenting her with my chronometer readings and Daniel's impossible GPS loop. She dismissed my personal quest, but was horrified by my data. She confirmed the government project was known internally as Project Serpent. Their goal was to use the desert's peculiar magnetic properties to establish a superluminal communication link, faster than light. Instead, they destabilized a natural anomaly and tore a temporal hole. Daniel, she insisted, wasn't missing, he was archived. His repeating GPS signal wasn't his current location. It was the persistent temporal trace of his last true second. Stone showed me highly classified, faded satellite imagery. The pictures were impossible, depicting the same piece of land with simultaneous, overlaid infrastructure. A 1950s test hangar flickering over a modern solar array. The objects weren't changing, they were jumping between their own temporal stages. She revealed that the only way to find Daniel was to enter the zone, not with a map, but with a temporal flux governor, a device she had built. My survival depended on maintaining my chronosignature, preventing my own time from being diluted and joining the archive. She handed me the ultimate tool, the modified chronometer, which measured the density of the temporal stream. It was a lifeline to sanity, a final anchor against the collapsing reality. My modified RV, shielded against any conceivable electromagnetic disturbance, shuddered as we crossed the unmapped boundary of the blackout zone. The transition was not a visual one, it was visceral. The ambient heat of the desert instantly became strange, intense, yet lacking the radiating warmth of the sun. The light itself seemed to possess a heavy, viscous quality like honey. It was bright, but all shadows were unnaturally static, frozen in place regardless of our movement. My truck's navigation system died with a flat final tone. The compass needle spun violently, then settled, pointing permanently to a vector that defied magnetic north, pointing instead toward a temporal singularity. The pressure of false superimposed times became immediately overwhelming. It felt like standing underwater in a pressurized chamber, a constant low-frequency hum vibrating through the bones. Stone had warned me. The desert is saturated with the past. It was not metaphor, it was physics. The sand under the tires crunched, brittle and hot, yet I saw faint trails of sub-zero frost clinging to the cactus needles, suggesting a simultaneous, superimposed micro-winter. This was the first terrifying lesson. Within the zone, all moments exist at once. The road itself was the most unsettling sight. A perfect ribbon of newly laid black asphalt stretched ahead, devoid of a single crack. But running immediately parallel, mere inches away, was an identical strip of asphalt, violently pitted, scarred by decades of abandonment and even chemical burns from the 1960s.
They were two versions of the same road, occupying the same space. My RV drove smoothly on the modern surface, but when I glanced at the side mirror, the reflection showed our truck bouncing wildly over a gravel service track, circa 1940. The chronometer, held tightly in my hand, flashed a critical warning. Temporal flux, 0.0003 sec/sec. The local time rate was collapsing. We were moving significantly slower than the time in the outer world. We had entered the chronal refuge, a sanctuary of impossible chronal density. We soon witnessed the inhabitants of this fractured reality. By a skeletal rusted gas station, its design screaming 1950s atomic futurism, stood a man. He was dressed in a pristine naval aviator uniform, but his entire figure was rendered with a disturbing lack of detail, as if he were a low-resolution image projected into reality. He was the first refugee, a pilot from 1956 lost during a routine test flight that ended in the zone. He approached the dead pump, his movements stuttering and restarting like a poorly edited film sequence. He repeated a flat mechanical phrase, his voice devoid of echo. "I have to get to San Diego fast. I am running late." He was perfectly preserved in his final conscious action, an eternal loop of urgency and failure. Stone warned me that to him we were less than real, a momentary ripple, a ghost of the future his timeline never reached. He saw us, yet his mind was incapable of processing data external to his moment of capture. The second encounter was different. Deeper in the sandflats near a ridgeline sat a young woman. Her clothes were a shocking, impossible mesh of neon fibers and smooth ceramic plating. She held a transparent, glowing tablet that pulsed with complex data. Her face was not blurred, it was etched with a clear, agonizing terror. She was undoubtedly from the far future. As I cautiously approached, she snapped her head up. Her eyes, unlike the pilot's, were sharp, focused, and utterly lucid. She saw me. She registered my time. The girl refugee, later identified as Kira, she whispered, her voice cracking with despair, "You are from the before. You are from the before. This isn't working. You have to get me out of this temporal reconstruction." Her use of before confirmed my brother's notes. Daniel wasn't just a victim. He was part of a larger plan, a crucial variable in a terrifying temporal calculus. Kira's desperate plea confirmed that Daniel had become the chronological anchor. We tracked his original worksite to a hidden, heavily reinforced military bunker. The facility was surrounded by a chain-link fence that was new and razor-sharp on the top, but dissolved into iron oxide and dust at the base, another perfect example of the temporal inconsistency. Inside, deep beneath the bedrock, we found the heart of the anomaly, the central activation apparatus for Project Chimera. It was a massive helical magnetic resonator, a grotesque fusion of 1950s vacuum tubes and impossible glowing superconductive filaments, levitating precariously over a deep, dark granite quarry. The granite itself was rich in trace elements, the perfect natural conduit for chronal energy. The resonator was designed to harness the desert's natural temporal instability. The military intended to use it to create a perfectly controlled, closed-loop environment, a data archive where they could safely observe the past and potentially predict the future, using the trapped consciousness of the temporal refugees. But the experiment became self-sustaining. Instead of closing the loop, they created an ever-expanding temporal fracture. Daniel, Kira explained through panicked whispers, realized the imminent collapse. He couldn't destroy the resonator without triggering an immediate chronal catastrophe. His only choice was to override the failsafes and use his own bioelectrical signature, his living consciousness, as a temporary stabilizer. He inserted himself into the magnetic field, locking the fracture in place. He was not dead. He was hyper-conscious, his mind eternally sustaining the chaotic system. Every time his GPS pinged, it was the sound of his consciousness being stretched and pulled across the immense temporal field. He was the library. The zone was the shelf.
Part 3. Nonlinear Horror and the Epicenter. As we moved into the vicinity of the active resonator, the horror shifted from external observation to internal cognitive breakdown. The chronometer went critical. Temporal flux, plus or minus 1.5 seconds per second. Time was no longer just slowing down. It was actively reversing, repeating, and randomizing. The environment became a paradox. I tried to walk in a straight line, but the same scorched juniper bush appeared before me 3 separate times, each instance showing a different level of decay. I touched a metal canister, and it instantly regressed 50 years, its paint peeling away in reverse before the metal itself was consumed by rust. I felt a fleeting chill on my skin, followed by a sudden, intense sun exposure, a literal overlap of past and present weather conditions. The most profound terror was the visibility of event loops. Near a dried-up wash, we saw 2 identical parked surveillance drones. One was pristine, the other was shattered and smoking, clearly the result of a catastrophic explosion that had not yet occurred in our linear sequence. This wasn't prediction, it was physical possibility intruding upon the present. We were constantly observing our own potential demise. The sheer cumulative psychic weight of the temporal refugees was a physical force. They were everywhere, a Roman centurion flickering through a 1980s armored personnel carrier, a family of 1930s Dust Bowl migrants watching us with vacant eyes. Their lack of interaction was not reassuring, it was terrifying, a testament to the absolute barrier of the temporal divide. But their presence was a psychic drain, their layered realities slowing down our own cognitive functions, threatening to turn our awareness into smeared, non-functional static. Kira met us at the entrance to the underground complex. She was a silent, desperate figure from the impossible future, her knowledge terrifyingly precise. She confirmed that Daniel had executed the defensive reconstruction. His action saved our time, the before, from total nullification, but it condemned him to an unending temporal nightmare. Kira's perspective. She revealed the future, her time, was one of perpetual low-level temporal instability, a direct result of Daniel's freeze. Her mission, before she was pulled into the fracture, was to return to this moment and provide the synchronicity device. She called the zone an infinite memory loop. She handed me the device, a small, dark obsidian-like plate that hummed with concentrated energy. It wouldn't allow me to travel through time, but it would temporarily synchronize my chronosignature with Daniel's, granting me 30 seconds of genuine, unfragmented contact inside the core. It was the only opportunity for a true farewell, or more accurately, an execution. She explained that Daniel's mind had effectively become a chronal superconductor. Removing him required a massive, instantaneous shock. The descent into the complex was a journey through a temporal labyrinth. The walls flickered with phantom communication displays. The air was heavy with the smell of ozone and the scent of forgotten fear. The main chamber was immense. The resonator dominated the space, a spiraling, polished metal construct that pulsed with an intense, sickly yellow-green light. It levitated silently, drawing its power from the deep earth current in the quarry below. The atmosphere was charged, visually buzzing with what appeared to be static electricity, but was actually pure, raw time energy. In the magnetic center, encased in a bubble of shimmering, distorting air, was my brother. He was shackled to a control console by thick, arcanic military cables, his body rigid. His eyes were open wide, but the expression on his face cycled with impossible speed, showing every human emotion and experience in a rapid-fire loop.
Agony, relief, scientific curiosity, final despair. He wasn't just Daniel, he was a living history archive. The chronometer was screaming, registering the absolute lowest reading. Temporal flux equals 0.0000000001 seconds per second. We had reached the 0 second, the closest human proximity to the non-existence of time. Part 4, The Paradox and the Sacrifice. I activated Kira's synchronicity device. The effect was immediate and violent. The chaotic light of the chamber collapsed into a pure, resonant white silence. I felt a tremendous physical snap as my consciousness aligned with Daniel's. For a moment, I experienced what he experienced, the relentless, simultaneous sensation of every moment he was anchoring. It was a dizzying, overwhelming pressure of infinite time being funneled into a single human brain. I staggered, fighting the urge to dissolve into the sheer data density. I stood next to him. His eyes finally focused. The rapid flicker of his expression stopped, locking onto a single profound moment of recognition and pain. I told him, "Daniel, it's Alex. I'm here. It's time to let go." His voice was hoarse, hollow, yet filled with an unbearable, eternal wisdom. "Alex, I can't. If I cease to anchor, the world collapses into itself. The desert is holding on to centuries of borrowed energy. My failure will trigger a final, cascading time inversion. It will be a total past-tense rollback, a recursive, apocalyptic failure that will rewrite or simply delete all human history after the first nuclear test. I saw it. I built this prison to prevent that." He revealed the truth. His death would be the ultimate destructive act, but his continued existence was the ultimate suffering. He pointed to an ancient, rusted lever, the emergency cutoff designed to instantly stop the resonator's primary current. He gave me his final, desperate instruction. "Do what you must, Alex. Find my original self. He's out there, in the before, in the time you saved. Live for both of us."
I reached for the lever, but Daniel's hand, rigid from years of temporal strain, clamped onto mine. The synchronicity device was about to fail. His final plea was simple, but catastrophic. "When you activate the rollback, remember, all the refugees, all the time anomalies we saw, they will be pulled back to their true moment simultaneously. This will create a paradox storm. You must withstand the energy surge. You must survive to warn the before." I couldn't hesitate any longer. I tore my hand free and forced the rusted lever down. The resonator died with a deafening, agonizing sound, a sound that wasn't merely noise, but felt like the fundamental tear of reality. The yellow-green light vanished, replaced by an intense, brilliant white flash. The shock wave wasn't air pressure, it was a temporal EMP. Daniel's body was instantly and catastrophically aged, every second of his anchor time catching up in a millisecond. His form crumpled, dissolving into a small pile of fine white geological dust on the console. The chronal anchor was severed. The world immediately erupted into chaos. The paradox storm was instant. All the trapped consciousnesses, all the accumulated, borrowed time was violently expelled back to its origin. The chamber filled with screaming, flickering light as the refugee forms, the pilot, the legionary, Kira, materialized and instantly imploded into light, rushing back to their proper timelines. The environment around me began to cycle backwards. The metal walls of the complex became smooth, new steel, then instantly rusted again. The gravel floor reversed its erosion. I ran toward the exit, desperately trying to maintain my own linear momentum, but the space was actively confusing my brain. I passed the same junction of corridors 4 times, each time seeing different signage, a product of the complex's construction and demolition phases being rapidly cycled. My own body was under assault. My vision swam.
I felt momentary flashes of intense youth, followed by the agonizing stiffness of advanced age. My mind struggled to maintain a cohesive memory as fragments of my own past and potential future tried to violently superimpose. This was the cost of surviving the rollback. I finally burst out onto the surface. The entire area was silent. The terrifying, cyclical chaos was gone. The blackout zone had been erased. All that remained was ordinary, empty, heat-baked desert. The chronometer in my hand was just a melted piece of unusable metal. Part 5. Legacy and the Warning. I collapsed on the highway, my mind scarred and broken, to be found by Highway Patrol 2 days later. My personal identity documents were inconsistent with my physical state. They listed me as 35, but my physical features suggested extreme stress, far older than my chronological age. Stone, the scientist, had vanished completely. Her records and trailer were wiped from existence. The government cleanup was total. I was categorized predictably as a paranoid wreck who suffered sunstroke. Yet I survived the rollback, and the world survived the annihilation. But the immense amount of energy released, the borrowed time, did not simply vanish. It became a residue, an ethereal temporal artifact, now dispersed across the wider world. Subtle, chilling glitches began appearing in the mainstream media. News reports spoke of microtemporal anomalies, security camera footage showing people walking backwards for exactly 3 seconds, then walking forward again, oblivious to the jump. Stock markets would blink out of existence for a millisecond, then instantly restore to their previous state. I saw reports of wildlife frozen mid-flight, only to resume their trajectory moments later, as if the local time stream had momentarily stuttered. The blackout zone was gone, but its temporal fingerprint was now a permanent, systemic feature of our reality. I knew the intelligence cleanup crews, the wardens, were back, but their goal was new and more terrifying. They were no longer trying to contain a localized event. They were attempting to harvest the residue. Through a risky covert channel, I established contact with a former colleague now working within the defense contractor sphere. He confirmed the new initiative, Project Janus. The government saw Daniel's death not as a tragic failure, but as a breakthrough. The released temporal residue provided a source of unstable, raw time energy. Project Janus was designed to use this energy to finally achieve controlled, two-way communication with the past, bypassing the destructive nature of the original resonator. The true horror is the location of the new experiments. They're not in the desert. The wardens realized they don't need ancient granite and remote valleys. They need bandwidth and data density. The new resonators are disguised within massive 5G cellular hubs and quantum computing centers across the country, particularly in major metropolitan areas. They are actively amplifying and stabilizing the temporal residue in our most populated spaces. The implication is catastrophic. The new temporal refugees won't be isolated pilots or soldiers. They will be office workers, commuters, and students, anyone standing near a powerful quantum link at the critical millisecond of a temporal surge. They are turning the entire country into an interconnected system of many blackout zones. I carry the scar of Daniel's final sacrifice, the sound of the rollback, and the knowledge of the burden he bore. His death was meant to buy us safety, but the government has leveraged that sacrifice for a new, pervasive terror. The straight line of time is a comforting lie. We live in an unstable present, built on the shattered pieces of the past Daniel tried to erase. The threat is no longer a geographical location. It is a ubiquitous network. Every time my phone connects to a high-speed network, every time a cloud server processes data, I feel the faint, high-frequency hum of the residue being manipulated. I see the potential for a new temporal anchor to be cast. The war on time has left the Mojave and moved into our cities. Watch your clocks, watch your navigation systems, and pray that the signal is never quite strong enough to consume your minute, your hour, or your life. The network is ready.